You know, everybody worries about the amount of protein content in their flour. Even I mention it in most of my videos and recipes. But I would argue that as long as you're choosing a really good quality flour, the hydration is way more important than the protein content of the flour. In fact, when you know how to balance hydration correctly, not only do you say goodbye to sticky dough and flat loaves, but you open up yourself to an entire world of exceptional flour. I'm going to explain why hydration is the key to your success. I'm going to show you how to understand how much liquid is hidden in the recipe, and I'm going to give you something that's going to help you immediately level up your baking. Now, while high protein bread flour is easy to bake with, you can still use soft flour that's got a lower protein content. And if you ever want to incorporate ancient grains or mill your own flour at home, you're going to need to kind of step away from this safety net of strong bread flour. Now, something that's helpful to remember is that flour differs in its capability to absorb water. You can think of flour as if it were a sponge. Add just enough water and it's going to remain in shape. It's going to hold on to that water perfectly. But as soon as you add too much water, it's going to run freely out of the sponge. Our goal is to balance the hydration, or the amount of liquid, to complement the flour and of course our skill level and the climate that we're baking in. That's going to make the dough easy to handle. It's going to help with that oven spring and the architecture of the loaf. But hydration also impacts the shelf life, the structure, texture and flavour of the bread. If you follow the method I share later, you are never ever going to need to worry about sticky dough again. Your dough is going to be a dream to handle and it's going to spring beautifully in the oven, producing wonderful flavours and textures. Right, so the best way to understand the relationship between a recipe's liquid and flour content is to express them using baker's percentages. Now, that might seem a bit scary, but I promise you it's super straightforward. Now, when we design a recipe, we start by calculating the total recipe ingredients. That includes the leaven and the starter. Let's break down a demo recipe real quick. Now, in my bowl, I've got a kilo or 1,000 grams of flour. Now, no matter the weight of the flour, 1,000 grams or 1,000 kilos, it's always considered 100%. Now, from here, every ingredient is expressed as a percentage of the flour. So, if I want to hydrate my dough by 75%, I would weigh out 750 grams of water. And of course, let's not forget about the salt. I like to use 2%, which works out to 20 grams. Now, these are the total ingredients of our dough, and it's at this level that we control the overall hydration. Now, let's say that I want to use, say, 20% of leaven in my dough. I would take 100 grams of water and 100 grams of flour from the total ingredients. And we can go one step further. We can remove the ingredients that made up the starter. That's 33 grams of water and 33 grams of flour. Now we can see the entire recipe broken down into its components. We've got the flour and water in the starter, the flour and water in the leaven, and the flour, water and salt in our main dough. This is the most accurate way of breaking down a sourdough recipe, but you must remember the hydration is always calculated using the total ingredients combined. But how does this affect your baking? Well, if you've ever experienced super sticky dough, or perhaps your dough tends to collapse when you kind of turn it out of the basket, there's a very good chance you need to balance the hydration of the recipe. Now, this problem can be super magnified if you're baking in a hot climate or you're using a soft flour. The absolute key to solving so many sourdough related issues is just to drop that hydration. Start low and gradually increase. Low and slow and then let it flow. Let's go back and drop the hydration of the previous formula to 65%. That's 650 grams of water. Now, a 10% difference in hydration doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But it's 100 grams of water. When you think of it like this, you can better understand the big impact that it can have on the dough's handling and performance capabilities. You know, if you really want to excel at baking sourdough, you need to understand how to balance a recipe's hydration correctly. There is no getting around it. Now I'm going to show you a foolproof method right now, but if you want to see a full tutorial specifically breaking down all of the baker's percentages for sourdough recipes, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to produce one for you. Right, now this method is called the hydration climb, and it is fantastic for balancing the hydration to match the flour, your skill level and the climate that you're baking in. Now you are going to need to use a recipe calculator for this. There are loads out there to choose from. Pick your favourite. It really doesn't matter. If you want to use mine, I'll link to it below. Now, when you do this hydration climb, I want you to create your leaven using equal quantities of flour and water. In future videos, I'll show you how to adjust the hydration of your starter and leaven. Now, every calculator is going to be slightly different, but you're going to need to set your recipe formula up just like this. I want you to start with the dough weight. Add the dough weight that best suits your basket. Add the amount of leaven that you're going to use in the recipe. And I'd suggest using one type of flour for your first hydration climb. Maybe it's one you've been struggling with, or perhaps you want to pop down to the supermarket and choose a new one to experiment with. And then of course you're going to add your salt. And then I want you to dial that hydration into 65%. Listen, 65% is where I suggest you start. We're going to tuck our egos away in our back pockets. Remember, low and slow, and then you can let it flow. Now, when we zoom out and we look at our formula, you can see the same pattern. We've got the total ingredients, we've got our starter, our leaven, and then the main dough ingredients. And it's the main dough ingredients that you're going to need right now because it's time to test bake. Okay, take your recipe, go bake it. Take notes during the process. How was the dough during mixing? Was it easy to stretch? Was it sticky? Was it difficult to shape? Did the dough hold up after you turned it out of the basket? Did it score easily? Did it even make it into the oven without collapsing? How did the loaf look and taste after baking? What was the crumb structure and texture like? And how long did it last before it became dry? These are all the things that you need to think about and take detailed notes on. Now don't bake this recipe once, bake it 3 or 4 times so that you can become experienced handling that specific hydration. Then you're going to get the most out of it. Then you go back to your formula and you adjust the hydration only by 2 or 3%. Now in most cases you're probably going to increase it from 65%, but don't be nervous if you feel you need to reduce it. The hydration percentage is not a score. Higher is not always better. The percentage is a tool we use to balance our dough correctly. Now beware, don't be tempted to start adjusting the hydration by 5, 10, 15, 20% unless you are 100% confident in your decision. Baby steps are normally better. Imagine walking towards the edge of a cliff. You're going to balance right on the edge of it. Now at the beginning, you'd probably take some big strides, but as you got closer to the edge and the danger increased, take smaller and smaller steps. It's the same with hydration. You can increase in larger increments at the beginning, but as you get closer to that saturation point of the flour or your capability of handling the dough, you need to keep those increments smaller. And then you just go back through the test baking process as many times as it takes to dial the hydration in to suit the flour. This is the power of recipe design and test baking. Does it take time? Yes, it does. Does it take effort? Yes, it does. But you'll only ever get out what you put in, and this is one area that's worth investing in. Keep me posted on your journey. Now, if you've ever wondered if baking stones and Dutch ovens really help with explosive oven spring, I'm going to reveal all in this video over here. Stay tuned.